of greatness is responsibility. It's an interesting quote, it's an interesting phrase in our time because there's always stories about behind the scenes of individuals who might not be all that they seem. When compared to their public persona, their private lives might be found wanting, might be lacking in some way. There might be questions, there might be concerns. The price of greatness is responsibility. When we look at who we consider great men throughout history, even if they are flawed, to some extent, we still look at the story of their life as them taking on some sort of responsibility and achieving something more than just for themselves. Yes, you might look at people who have become rich and famous now in the modern age and think of them as great men. But historically speaking, those types of figures, they don't necessarily last in the public subconsciousness or consciousness. When we think about great men, we think about great leaders who did something, something that we could point to, something that most people will instantly say, that was great. That did something to change the course of history, whether it is for their town, city, nation, region, or the whole world. And now, I do find it interesting that it seems as though perhaps the modern age has peeled the curtain back too much, and we ourselves were jaded. We're not necessarily as naive as a society as we used to be, but that comes with benefits. We're not easily fooled, but the flip side is we're cynical and we don't necessarily strive anymore for something that might be deemed currently as too idyllic. What's wrong with idealism? And we allow our leaders to kind of get away with imperfection somewhat blatantly, too blatantly. Whereas in other parts of the world, they strive hard to hide even the shadow of a minor flaw in their character. We perhaps try to overlook major flaws. Although I have to admit, in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, perhaps their tolerance, their standards might have fallen down to ours or even dropped below ours. And I say that because there's a couple of things that are on the horizon whose the matters may or may not make a difference with regards to how we believe certain course of events to have taken place. One is with regards to the pariah divers. As we have said on the show and reported in various media outlets, it's not just pariah who is potentially in violation of regulations and OSHA is going to take them to court, but it's also at that level, LMCS. With regards to health and safety of the workers, both entities are potentially liable, and we believe both entities are probably liable. And I believe that is what came out in the Commission of Inquiry. With regards to the rescue, that's a whole different kettle of fish. Responsibility now of these individuals, but it still goes back to, is the state bearing responsibility for a situation that it has allowed to happen under its very nose? To some extent, like in other things, I do wonder if waiting for the courts to handle it to this degree is a cop-out. You're hiding behind the process of the courts so that you don't have to get involved. In this case, perhaps because you don't want to get involved, the chairman of pariah, or I believe it's the chairman of the board, or one of the big shots, those who know he's related to someone in parliament that's in a very high position. among other political considerations with the appointees, as well as the fact that the more questions that are asked and the further things are dug into, perhaps more things potentially could be uncovered. And who wants to rock the boats? Remember, they're saying everything is fine with Heritage and Paria, and we're making profits and things are looking good. Don't look at the refinery. We'll get a buyer for that. Don't look at the fact that he may or may not have charges of corruption in his own country. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight before we actually start off the daily review is that the SSA situation, an ongoing saga, the fired SSA employees, of which only a fraction were given any charges, and the charges that they were given, that they were charged with, did not speak to the accusations or the claims made by the Prime Minister and anonymous sources in the past. And these individuals, I believe it's 28 in all, even though 3 or 4 were charged, but all 28 are potentially looking to sue the state. And this will be interesting with regards to if the state might even try to hide behind the criminal investigation and court matters to forestall this civil matter. And it makes me wonder if there's 2 errors here. Yes, the state not taking responsibility for things again, developing on its own nose, but then also trying to, well, pull a fast one on us, deflect. At the end of the day, as I said it before, I wait to see the courts deal with this. And if they do sue the state, it doesn't necessarily mean that the state did anything wrong. Sometimes plaintiffs might be frivolous or might be acting in bad faith, but hopefully it would allow the court to examine at least some of the details of what happened. And if it goes on public record, we might be able to know more. But it's kind of sad. Yes, technically the judiciary is supposed to be independent of the legislature or the executive. It's meant to do so, separation of powers, to ensure that there are checks and balances. But I feel as though all too often we rely on the courts too much to carry out the responsibility that the executive and the legislature has. With regards to the legislature, it is to clean up the messes of badly written and implemented law. With regards to the executive, it is to examine things that our own leaders seemingly are incapable of showing leadership. So then I have to ask, because all politicians care about their legacy, and we're going to have an airport that's supposedly supposed to service 3 million people. That's the new legacy project, because the first one didn't pan out, except I do believe the number of international flights we have on a daily basis in Tobago is less than 1. The old terminal will handle domestic. So one of the things that I'm very curious is, with this legacy project, will there be days where there will literally be no flights coming through a $1.5 billion airport? That's what the Prime Minister is pushing for his legacy. But what is the point of his legacy and the legacy of others if they cannot point to all the ways that they showed responsibility? COVID and energy are but 2 parts of the equation of governance during their administration. It can't be the sum total. All right. I went on a bit there, but with that said, let's move on now. We'll go with the daily review. All right, a lot of details to get into. Not a lot of time to do it in. I'm sorry for my ranting, but first story, wanted to get into the fact that the opposition, and some of these stories might be a little old, but these are the ones that I want to touch on. Apologies for not having a show yesterday, but I want to touch on some of these stories and mention them and give my opinion, and maybe people could call in later on to give theirs. The opposition accused Minister Hines of expediting FULs for his security. This is not for the firearms that they use while on duty, but rather private firearms, most likely to defend themselves, protect themselves. It's understandable. And to some extent, if they are going to be security for a minister, one would hope that they would more or less meet the criteria to be granted an FUL. Now, MP Dr. Munal Rudilal revealed some WhatsApp chats between Minister Hines and then Commissioner Gary Griffith with regards to requests being made for FULs for his security. Now, Karen pointed out with regards to the Alan Warner situation, at the end of the day, if your boss, even though technically the Police Service Commission is the only body that can hire and fire, we have already gone into how independent institutions, at least in the current administration, if not others, potentially have been undermined. Now, Karen already went on how if your boss gives you a request, it kind of feels like an order. It implies an order because they're not going to say, do this. They're going to say, can you do this? Officially. Unofficially, there's, to some degree or another, depending on a whole load of context, there's going to be the understanding of if it is a demand or if it is truly a request. Now, technically speaking, the commissioner legally can interpret it however he wants to, because again, the chain of command is not so clear-cut and bottom-down from the Minister of National Security to order the commissioner with regards to the duties that the commissioner has sole authority over. Minister can't technically do that, hence makes a request. But again, there's a lot of informal power there in the relationship. Now, Gary has come out and responded to say, well, yes, these things did happen, and he had a lot of them. They weren't necessarily illegal. Rather, they were hypocritical because of the current stance of the administration has taken with regards to FULs and renewing FULs and granting FULs, right? Because it's not so much, and he pointed out, and I do believe that this happens a lot in society. A lot of people make use of this in society, and they don't necessarily understand how it is the gateway to wider corruption, to actual corruption. So Gary basically said that the reason why they do this is because of the breakdown in the administration of firearms, and that is what happens throughout our public service. People always try to find a friend to pull a string. The breakdown, it's not to get FULs that they don't necessarily deserve, it's the fact that the system is not moving forward at a reasonably enough pace, or it's not working properly, so you get a favor to kind of expedite things. And it's not necessarily illegal, but that sort of assumes that the minister is not making demands of the commissioner, which when you read the messages, assuming them to be true, we don't necessarily have any way of verifying or authenticating them. It seems as though that the minister was to some extent putting pressure on the then commissioner, or at least it could be argued. It could be argued, but it's not necessarily clear. And the flip side is, I understand what Gary Griffith is saying with regards to, well, it's not illegal. He is a government official. He has access to inquire, to find out, to maybe point out. But at the end of the day, the commissioner is still making decisions, and we're still going through the due process. That's the implied situation that Gary has. And it's something that's backed up by Stephen Williams per se. Because Stephen Williams, he was acting commissioner for years, and for all intents and purposes, he is just as much a commissioner as anyone else who has been substantive in that role. He's been in the role longer than Earl. He said, look, he never took any of those things as orders. They were requests. And based on the hierarchical power structure, that more or less is what it's like. However, senior execs in the TCPS with experience, they wanted to say that, well, Gary's issue was he was bombarded with requests because he opened up the FULs. And in doing so, in trying to push the FULs forward, I'm paraphrasing here and adding what I think is the context, deal with some of the backlog. he opened it up too much, and maybe the checks and balances were not all that what they should have been, or at least on the surface, all of what they should have been, which then led to the Stanley John investigation and that whole next kettle of fish, of which we ourselves still don't have full transparency over. So it's difficult to give an absolute determination or judgment or opinion on what that situation is in its entirety. But at the end of the day, the main issue, and I think people will want to say, oh, look, the minister is looking to get a favor. That's not the issue. That's not the issue. If you want to say that it is somewhat unethical, it should not be done, and we should close whatever loopholes that exist like that, which aren't really loopholes per se, but essentially deal with the gray area, well, then we need to demand that of our legislature to make more robust laws to close those windows, which most politicians tend to not want to do because, you know, they want their turn. But we have to be also willing to accept that. And we also need to, I don't know, improve the bureaucracy, because right now it's the minister. This is not unique to the minister and his position. Yes, with regards to FULs, not everybody could do something like this. But Fitzgerald Hines is not the only person in TNT who is looking to find a friend or somebody they know or use a link to find out, hey, what's going on with my application and whatever, right? What's the hold up? Help me out here because it's taking too long. I've been waiting too long. The average wait is X and I've been waiting X plus Y. And we have more or less accepted that in our society. We're not really doing anything to change it. So that's the first real issue. But then the second one is, again, the hypocrisy. For FULs for who you want, but not for others. That is an oversimplification, but the reality. All right, let's move on to the next story. This will just be a quick mention. WASA has launched a new operational control center. The idea is it should help monitor its water distribution systems and deal with things like what happened with the long-term scam where a community was disconnected and Mont Diablo, I think it was, and essentially the scammers then sold water that they accessed from WASA, which kind of to add injury, to put salt in the wounds, to rub salt in the wounds. There we go, we'll go with that one. And by having this center, the WASA will essentially be able to see where leaks, shutoffs, water flows, at least in theory, depending on how technically robust the system is, in real time. Although real time might be relative, it might be a week, but it definitely would not, or at least hopefully this system will prevent communities from protesting after not having water for months or even weeks. Weeks with an S, not week. Right? So we'll see how effective the system will be, because I actually do think this is a good thing, but I don't really think we have many systems like this to monitor a national network like this, right? So it'll be interesting to see how effective the implementation is, as well as maintaining the system. That will be key, of course, in TNT. All right, want to move on quick, hitting stories fast. This is one, also another mention. A police officer is suing another police officer, his immediate superior, after, well, for assault. It is, there are two versions of events, of course. The officer who is suing basically says that he was assaulted by his superior, who smelt as though he was intoxicated. The superior, on the other hand, is claiming that the officer, he was not reporting to duty, or apparently they went to get food before they came back to the station to clock out, something like that. And the officer was the one that was aggressive first. At the end of the day, however, I believe the state is looking at the situation as a bad sign, as you have members of the TTPS going to court. And the judges basically say, given the current climate of uncontrolled crime, citizens should expect that there is an organized and focused approach by those within the TTPS So this is something of a bad look for the police. Of course, we don't necessarily know who is in the fault here, but moving on to the next story. Similar situation in the sense where they have two versions of events, but there's, in this case, a verdict. A fireman who was shot in the incident and left paralyzed sued the state and successfully got, I believe, over $400,000, 412, potentially more, I believe, with interest, $412,000 over the incident. The police apparently were going after an acquaintance of his or a friend of his. He was at the friend's house. How things unfolded are disputed, but at the end of the day, the fire officer, I assume, again, he's not actually an active fire officer anymore, he attempted to flee the situation because he believes that, well, he claims that the cops began shooting as they entered, right? He says that the officers threatened to shoot him and kill him. They kicked him, they mashed him, and they assaulted him. Now, his friend, who the police were actually after, no, sorry, the fire officer was then charged with 8 counts of robbery with violence, but those charges were dismissed. I believe, again, it's with the association of who he was with. And the court was willing to dismiss the assault claims and so on. However, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, and exemplary damages, because again, they charged him with things and the case couldn't move forward. It makes me wonder with regards to exactly what is it. And it's not as though other jurisdictions don't have this issue with police officers not doing a good job, right? I get that. But how could a situation that led to a man being paralyzed, and as far as I'm aware, it's not as though he opened fire on the police. I believe they want to say that his friend who was inside the house, the fire officer at the time was in the porch, the friend opened fire. They ended up hitting the fireman who attempted to flee in the back. Wrong place, wrong time for being shot, maybe. But then the malicious prosecution on top of that. There's a lot of questions here, and I don't know if this case really aired all of it out. But as my co-host would lament, well, that's 400K more of the Treasury gone because of actions of agents of the state. Speaking of that, and to highlight the issue further, next story, a Cuban man was, I believe, released. He was charged for not having a license, essentially because it seems as though the police officers did not go deep enough to find out that he had an international driver's license. And the judge basically had to caution the TTPS in applying the law that we are not applying the law in a manner in which it might be alleged that the particular persons are being discriminated against in the application of that law. And it's because, again, what was the evidence? Did they go far enough, right? He's a foreign national. They get that. But I believe the judge is basically saying far too many times when police are non-national, they are charged for driving without a permit and brought before the court without extensive inquiries being done. This is the lawyer of the defendants. And basically the judge agreed. There was nothing to suggest that the international permit was invalid. This is counterproductive to our overburdened criminal justice system. And also it makes one have to question to what extent, and again, this is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago, this happens in America too. To what extent do we have police officers that are not fully aware of the law? Because at some point they might be in situations where they feel compelled to use violence, but if it starts off with a poor understanding of the law in the first place, we might get another $400,000 lawsuit down the pipe. All right, and then last mention, quick, police did seize $4.5 million of cocaine hidden in hair products. They also made an arrest. This is grading on a curve, a win, and a big deal, because unless my memory is incorrect, outside of finding cocaine washed up on the shore, police generally do not interdict cocaine shipments, nor does the Coast Guard or any other arm of national security. So this is the first time I have seen cocaine being interdicted by a police operation, at least in a long time, if not the first time in the history of Talking Point. I can't fully remember. It seems as though it's always washed up on the shore. They get marijuana, but they don't get cocaine. Now, the reason why it's great on a curve is kudos to TPS for interdicting this cocaine. But this should be something like, given the openness of our borders and the inability to prevent it from coming in, one would think, because there's a reasonable suspicion that there's a lot of drugs passing through TNT, one would think we would get more than a bust here or there every couple of years if the police were effectively doing their part. But to be fair, they're doing more than the Coast Guard. All right, let's take a break. We'll switch gears. We'll welcome my guests. Stay tuned. This is Talking About on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Feel the rhythm, feel the beat. On Saturday, July 13th at 5 p.m., join us at Queen's Royal College for an unforgettable evening of steel pan music and community spirit. It's Steel at Sunset, a spectacular concert to raise funds for students of Queen's Royal College and Providence Girls Catholic School to visit Washington, D.C. and experience a life-changing educational tour. Hosted by the Profi QRC Steel Orchestra with a special guest performance by the internationally acclaimed Supernova Steel Orchestra. Don't miss out on this evening of steel pan magic, showcasing our students' talent and national instrument. Tickets are only $150 and are available now at QRC and Providence Girls Catholic School. Support our youth. Enjoy amazing performances and be part of something special. That's Steel at Sunset this Saturday, July 13th, 5 p.m. at Queen's Royal College. See you there. Let's make music and memories together. Call 622-1671 or 624-1429 for more information.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
And we're back here on Talking Point on WESN. And I am joined, I know we haven't had breakthrough for a couple of weeks. We apologize. However, there are still certain aspects of art and culture important to the society And I have brought the man on to speak about those things. I could speak somewhat from the political perspective. He will come in from the arts and culture perspective. I am speaking, of course, of Mark Anthony Peter. Good morning, Mark.
Good
Welcome
morning,
back
Sean.
to
It's
Talking
it's been
Points.
thank you. It's been a minute since I've seen you, since we've done this together. How are you?
Yes, I am being assaulted.
I could see
I've
that.
had a very interesting morning. I saw lightning on the horizon on my way here to the point. And now I'm being assaulted by a deluge of mosquitoes because this rainy season is a special something, my boy. It's a special something.
It
So
is.
with that said,
Mm-hmm.
um, a couple of things happened with regards to art, kind of, touching
Recently,
on the
yeah.
political space. And
Mhm.
it got me thinking because initially we were going to speak about the recognition via legislature of the national instrument. And then we also had the situation with the Ministry of National Security having a new competition with 3 age brackets, $30,000 prize money, $10,000 per age category, to get a song with regards to anti-crime messaging and to support essentially the fight against crime. And I wondered, to some extent, while these are positive things out of context,
Mhm.
part of the context is it kind of like somewhat too little? And to some extent, at least especially with the pan too late, um, is this more lip service than actual authentic engagement and implementation of anything substantial, long lasting, a change in the status quo, or rather just a flash in the pan? Hey, look, we're doing something, and then it'll kind of disappear after a few months.
I think it's a good question. With regards to the steel pan, I think, well, first of all, there is in the primary school curriculum, all children are taught, at least they should be taught, that the steel pan is the national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago, right? So there were a lot of confused people on social media commenting, and they were like, "Wasn't it always the national instrument?" Yes, it was. In terms of its history, but it was never put into law. Some people may have the opinion that it's a little bit too late. Personally, for me, I say better late than never. And I think this gives the opportunity for certain things to prevent certain things. So, for an example, there was a viral video, I think maybe last year or year before, where um, someone went on social media and basically created a video saying that the steel pan was originated from another Caribbean island, right? So that kind of allows for this legislation kind of allows for things like that to be sort of prevented or sort of monitored, just because we are able to legally say such and such is the case, right? Um, I'm not sure. I'm hoping that it's more, as simple as it may seem, it's a little bit more than just, than just lip service, than just on the surface type of things, because this can hopefully lead the way into achieving the full patent for the, well, as much as a full patent for the steel pan, because we really don't have it, just because other territories have also claimed certain aspects of it. But at least it's put into law that it is the national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago, and it's kind of on the heels. World Steel Pan Day is on August 11th, so I think it's really good.
So, one thing though, Mark, if you could raise your output on your
Sure.
mic or on your audio.
All right.
But with that said, I think you pointed out the fact that technically the pan was our national instrument before. We just didn't recognize it. And is this one of those cases? Because I believe when we were speaking, um, there's always that question about the fact that, hey, we didn't copyright this thing and other people are being able to use this thing. And, it's just one of many things where it was created here. Not necessarily everybody knows that it was created here. The fruits of the creativity of at least some of our citizens kind of gets overlooked, the contribution to the wider global society.
Well, first of all, I think It is being uh, recognized internationally, mainly because many of our local educators, homegrown educators and teachers, and steel pan musicians, they are doing the work internationally, teaching it in other countries and other territories. So it's not a matter of it necessarily being taken over. I just think the word is spreading. Yes, there may be instances where they certain countries recognize this thing, and they've in terms of manufacturing the steel pan, on like an industrial scale. Yes, other countries have definitely have definitely done that before us. But it's an interesting thing where we we kind of it's still being recognized. It's still being recognized that it's from here. And again, I think it's just a matter. There's the responsibility on us musicians for continuing to spread not just awareness, but just to spread the fact that this is our instrument. It's the only instrument invented in the 20th century. So it's a matter of just continuing to do the work, accelerating the work as well. Pantrin Bigo is also part of that hearing, that reading for the bill and stuff like that. So and the president was instrumental in keeping that forward. So it's a matter of, okay, so this is the situation now. What are we going to do moving forward?
And it's not as though we're saying that, well, the steel pan is ours, and to some extent, it's associated with the Caribbean, but it's ours, and we should tell the rest of the Caribbean, fire on you, this is ours, you can't have it. It's not that we're saying that, but to some extent, it goes back to what I think is national identity. We've used the steel pan. Look, the Tourism Development Company, their logo, it's now defunct, it's split into multiple companies, but their logo was a combination of a pan and a sun, BWIA, before they got essentially restructured to Carl. They didn't get restructured, they went defunct, and then Carl was born. But anyway,
Right, yes.
they were essentially restructured. They used the steel pan. I remember my being a Form 6 when I was going to school, and he made note of how when those BW planes flew overhead, and the sense of national pride and identity in because the whole plane was painted in a pattern, and then you had this white steel band as part of the paint scheme, just on the entire underside of the plane.
Yeah.
It was to loudly say, this is who we are. And yet we've only now in 2024, that was 2001. 2001. 2024, the legislature has now said we put something in place where legally we recognize it. Does it, I mean, on some level, some people might say, well, it's not, the practical necessity of it. It's not as though we never acknowledged it, but I do kind of wonder if, as a society, we really don't take these things seriously. And then, to some extent, it's why we spend more time, identifying with the crazy things. Trinidad is not a real place, as opposed to identifying with our national symbols and icons and the icons of our history and our achievements, and use those as examples of how to move forward.
Yeah. So you touched on something interesting. This whole thing of Trinidad is not a real place, right? We need to be, I think, as a society, we need to be very careful not to get too cynical in how we view certain things, right? Politics is not my area of expertise. So in terms of why this may have taken so long, maybe there was not enough push on the government level, on the upper people level, that sort of thing. Maybe it's just there were other things that were taken into that had other priorities, that sort of thing. And now, in terms of our identity, now we on to reference to reference a breakthrough guest that we had on when we were talking about creative identity. She said, Cameron said, there is responsibility on the government's part, but there's also a lot of responsibility on our part, the people's part, society's part. And when it is a situation where we can identify it in certain things, like in our branding, in the BWIA logo, in other areas of our lives where, the steel pan is just part of the brand, and it's part of the marketing, it's part of the graphics and all of those things, and it's in the culture. Like, look, we have so many steel bands, we have so many performances where steel band is part of it. The steel band is our orchestra, essentially, right? So I think we, as a society, the people, we've done pretty well in terms of identifying with this thing, in terms of making sure that it's as part of our culture. And who knows, maybe because, I'll throw this out there, maybe because certain legal things took so long that we felt the need to push. But I hope that now that it is within the legal, now that it is recognized on the legal level, then we even push even more, because we are saying that this is ours, and not only push it and keep it to ourselves, but push it and share it, as we've continually done throughout time.
Well, because the reason why I think this is important, and what I have there at the bottom of the lower thirds, it's not a quote, it's actually something that I just came up with on the spot this morning. Art strengthens culture. We cannot say arts and culture meaning, various artistic endeavors, but culture goes beyond just art, right? Art, however, strengthens culture. And then culture helps strengthen values. What are our traditions? What are our ideals? What are we striving towards? And one of our callers from Tobago, he pointed out the fact that, look, the slave trade, and I do think that this is one area where the argument has a lot of merit. It stripped culture away, therefore it stripped values away, and now to some extent the whole Western Afro world is trying to rebuild a society when you really think about it, right? It's unique to them. It doesn't have as much influences from the ancestral land as, say, the European influences in the Caribbean and North America. And I do then know, if art strengthens culture and culture strengthens values, then what about the reverse? A disrespect of art and an oversight for culture could potentially undermine any attempt to have strong values and lead us to situations where we have immorality, corruption, and crime. That's my thought process in all of this, in the fact that I feel more so than when I was younger, there's more of a lacking in that space, and we are of the worst for it.
Okay, so in terms of the artist, and I will even extend it to the people as well.
Well, let me just make this point, Mark. I don't blame the artist for it.
No, I know. Yeah.
I think it's a wider societal issue.
Yes. We need to be very mindful about how we respond to things. And do we wait? We need to ask the question, do we wait until something bad happens to then respond with good? There have been countless examples, every day, where people do good as a result of keeping the good happening. And then there's a push when there is a pushback of, it's that not to get too philosophical, but is that constant push and pull of the good versus evil type of thing. Art strengthens culture strengthens values. You're right. I think we are on a journey of refinding or finding back what our values look like. The problem is, my only concern is how much outside culture, more so North American culture, how much that infiltrates our society and our culture, only because we are inundated with North American culture on some level, because it's just everywhere, right? But we need to, and I think it's something that we need to but we need to continue to teach our children, or teach our young people, the generations coming up, about the power of choice and what that means. And choosing to engage in certain things, choosing to, and it's the point that I made. I think I made it during Carnival. We people don't know about our culture. Yes, because they're inundated with North American culture, but also because they don't choose to go look. And we need to always be aware of what we are feeding ourselves, what we are feeding our inner circle with. In terms of coming back to the whole steel pan, what we've done before, some may say it's enough, some may say it's not enough, we need to even do more. I don't mind. I'm always one for improvement. I just hope, again, I'm going to make the point again, I just hope, because this is the case, I hope we continue pushing with the same sense of pride, or even more so, some more pride in our instruments, in our culture, in our art, and continue to push and push and push and push, because essentially the art is part of who we are. And I don't think there's anybody who will deliberately not push it. The artists will continue to push it. The artists will continue to be authentically themselves and showcase it in their work. I am just excited to see where it will go next, what's next for Pan, all every single year. That's for me.
Now, a topic that was somewhat controversial, at least on Talking Point, because the callers who did call in on it, they weren't necessarily generous to the Minister of National Security. I was willing to say that the initiative was a decent one, because it's not as though he was investing some ridiculous large fraction of his budget into this song competition. It's a small investment, but I think it's a step in the right direction. However, I think you brought up the point. It's reactionary. Now, obviously, if crime was under control, then the Minister of National Security is not necessarily going to have a competition for anti-crime songs, but it is somewhat reactionary. It's kind of late to the party in some respects. Do you have any concerns that this is just a lip service thing? Because I do wonder, what would Ministry of National Security really know about implementing anything to do with arts, anything to do with music? We already, I would, from the outside looking in, more than you, would look at even the government's Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture at times, and the National Carnival Commission, and question, do they really know what they're doing? Much less a ministry that has nothing to do with music at all.
All right, so I have some thoughts on this. So first of all, I think regardless of the ministry, arts and culture is in everyone's DNA, I think, on some level. So, moving that point aside, I hope that the initiative is not lip service, as you say. I hope that it is not. I hope that it does not turn into a mediocre effect. Mediocre. What's the word I'm looking for? Effort to say that the ministry is doing something. I really hope that this becomes something really, really impactful. The problem that I see arising in these situations is where, quote unquote, and it's kind of the same point that you made, quote unquote, non-artistic or non-artist people running artist initiatives, where it's a matter of, so it comes down to, I think for me, arts administration. When there are a lot of people who don't understand the art to the extent of the practitioner making administrative decisions for something that is a fully arts initiative, that is where things get sticky. So I hope that the right people are on the team. I hope that the right people are being hired for this. Ages 8 to, what is it, 24 or 28 or something like that. That's a big gap. Right?
So there's three categories, I believe. So they're broken into three trunks.
Okay. So I'm guessing children, youth, and adults.
20-year-olds won't be competing with the 9 and 10-year-olds.
Right. No, for sure. They won't definitely be in the same category, but that is a large age range to cover for any sort of,
right,
thing like that. So I hope that the right people are involved so that it does not turn into, because what the government needs to understand, maybe they do, I'm not in their heads, but the people are watching every single thing that you do, every initiative. The people are watching, and when you drop the ball, that is broken trust. And broken trust is something that we really shouldn't strive for. It's something that and when you drop the ball and you're like, oh, well, we tried. No, no, that should not be the case at all. I think I'm really really hopeful, and I'm waiting to see what comes of it. Um, and it's just a matter of waiting and see. But I really really hope it's not just some sort of mediocre effort just to be like, hey, we did this.
Well, that leads me to the last question, as we're more or less out of time on the segment. Because I don't think this is the first initiative quite like this. This isn't that unique to try to have a song competition or something like for
Yeah,
something on a national scale.
for sure.
But it's not as though we've had like big successes, I think, memorable national moments out of these things. When these things fail, because you touched on this earlier, if and when, because I'm not saying that this song competition will fail, right? If it fails, if things like this fail, do they add fuel to the fire? And the fire is basically the sentiment of people kind of looking down on anything that is local, or in this case, local culture, and being more and more inclined to consume foreign art, foreign culture, to more identify with those things, because we can't take our own selves serious enough to do things properly. So why should we bother then? If the government can't do it, if why the society doesn't do it, why am I going to do it? So
Yeah.
And it adds fuel to the fire of our local culture being overtaken by foreign culture.
Yeah. So to answer your question, it does sort of add fuel to the fire, where if what we continue to put out is subpar, is substandard, is mediocre, then it will create a push of other people to find the content that is not substandard, right? Which ends up being North American culture. Excuse me. We need there's and I'm going to say this. This is a concern that I have for the arts overall. I've been to my share of productions, my share of concerts. I've taken in my share of televised things. Um, Sometimes people knock it out of the park, and sometimes people drop the ball. And we need to do better as an art society, as a society on a whole, to make sure that our things are up to a certain standard, right? Um, Granted, we may have certain disadvantages. We may not have the necessary funding that other, big production companies on a larger scale have. So maybe the equipment that we may be using is a bit like 5, 7, 10 years behind, right? But it's a matter of making the best out of it. I just hope that this particular initiative does not just go into that throwaway pile of this entire list of these are the things that have failed, and then we discard it and we forget about it, right? But I will say though, the more impactful situations that have happened where positive change are created is in our community organizations, our community arts organizations more specifically. Those who engage the youth, those who engage community, those who have very, very who are about community engagement, who are about lifting the morale of Trinidad and Tobago, who are about instilling values and instilling morals and things like that. Um, and those are the sort of things that are treasures that sort of happen organically. When things are kind of forced, it does not always translate well. So I'm hoping again that this is not something that is, again, forced, because then that would I hope it's genuine, and I hope it's intentional, because then that would dictate the rewards of it.
And for those who might think that art and culture does not have such a great, big impact on society, I will just point to one Kendrick Lamar in his latest music video and in his last concert. He apparently brought two rival major gang factions in California, and as part of a wider cultural movement, united them in at least in some small way, right? Behind him and behind their state, their region, and their respective cities. And we're talking about the bitterest of rivals coming together on stage in a music video, in a movement. People who would have probably been killing each other on any given Sunday. They're willing to put aside their differences because of art and culture. All right, with that, if you don't know who Kendrick Lamar is and what I'm talking about, ask your children and your grandchildren. They'll fill you in, folks. We'll take a break. When we come back, we open the phone line. Stay tuned.
Feel the rhythm. Feel the beat. On Saturday, July 13th at 5 p.m., join us at Queen Joel College for an unforgettable evening of steel pan music and community spirit. It's Steel at Sunset, a spectacular concert to raise funds for students of Queen Joel College and Providence Girls Catholic School to visit Washington, D.C. and experience a life-changing educational tour hosted by the Profi QRC Steel Orchestra with a special guest performance by the internationally acclaimed Supernova Steel Orchestra. Don't miss out on this evening of steel pan magic, showcasing our students' talent and national instrument. Tickets are only $150 and are available now at QRC and Providence Girls Catholic School. Support our youth. Enjoy amazing performances and be part of something special. That's Steel at Sunset this Saturday, July 13th, 5 p.m. at Queen's Royal College. See you there. Let's make music and memories together. Call 622-1671 or 624-1429 for more information.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process, we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there, next in stuff. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
I'm back here. This is talking about on WESN, all the way from Sister Isle in Tobago. Of course, I'm still here. The weather is not necessarily looking great. There was lightning, I think, on the horizon earlier this morning, and I was dreading, hoping that the lightning wasn't close to my location because that would have been a challenge. But that seems to have died down now. Mark Antimeter is joining me, not in studio. And I do envy you, Mark. Either way, you are indoors, I am outdoors. I have to ask, now, folks, now is the time we open up the phone lines. You want to hear from you, the viewer. You could call in, have your say. You could speak about what we spoke about. You could speak about something else. Maybe we didn't speak about something that you want to bring up. That's also fine. But with that said, I I do want to point out the anecdotal experiences of those who, Mark, I don't know if this, well, before we get into that, we have Diego Martin on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
Okay.
Morning. I hope you're enjoying your vacation. Sorry, not vacation, your time in Tobago. And good morning
Yeah,
to your co-host.
definitely not a vacation. Definitely not a vacation.
So I pull back that comment. Sorry for that. Okay. I want to focus on this culture and art. And I want to commend the Minister of National Security for the very first time and possibly the only time where he's involved in a number of artists to sing a song to basically mitigate against crime. But his optics was so poor and so divisive. You know why? I look at all the artists and I didn't see a chutney singer, nor anybody in the other half of the community. You understand where I'm going with it? And why is that? If this is affirmative action, and you're telling me half of the population is more vulnerable to crime than other half, then you are admitting you have failed. The other point I want to get, children and safety. You remember 5-6 years ago, we were talking about the motor children with the firearm, the high-powered rifles and things like that. I want to know, at that point in time, they had allegedly were the children of a high government. He has now moved on to another ministry. I want to know now if those were provided with provisional FULs for them to play and train with that. Now, the intention of providing a provisional FUL is to be at reach age or you have the responsibility per se, you will get FULs. I want to know at this point in time, two questions. Were they granted provisional and reaching this particular age, officially given, who is the position of, I'm asking no more questions because there was an investigation and it's looked.
Caller? All right, the callers connection was slowly suffering a slow death as he was cutting in and out. But I think we got the gist of it with regards to your questions. I'll say this: if Hines was a different individual, if I was Hines, one of the things that I would love to do would be to collaborate with Iowa George on a music video, on a water song, and lean into those memes and have fun with it. But that doesn't necessarily speak to the crime situation. I don't know if, I mean, he's a well-spoken man. Would he be a good singer as well? I'm not entirely sure. But with regards to the provisional FULs, that's an interesting question. Although I hate to say this, on principle, you're correct, caller. You are very correct. And because it's exposed, it's unfortunately something that we probably should not ignore. But on a practical level, let me put it this way, there are bigger problems. And that's not an issue that I ever really wanted to devote a lot of time and attention to. It did not have the priority to me. Mark, I don't know if you had any with regards to the caller's comments.
Yeah, so first of all, I'd just like to say the Minister of National Security cannot catch a break with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. He cannot see his way. He really is struggling a little bit. Anyway, so in terms of the rollout of the initiative, I did not really catch the entire thing. There is a song called "The Call," and I liked it. We saw some prominent people, right, in it, and I think that would help. In terms of not everybody being represented, so this is me. I'm gonna give 2 points.
Okay, hold on. I'll have to ask you to hold on to those points. Make a note, because we have 2 callers on the line. Faisabad first. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning to the gentleman. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago. Sean, I was talking about culture building. I remember, you see, we also use culture as a divisive thing, you know. I remember when Brother Marvin sang Jahadi Bai, which in my opinion should have been the national anthem of Trinidad and Tobago. He was discriminated against, like fellas like Crocro and all of them fellas. When Aldo sung for the past prime minister, he was discriminated against. He was almost cast aside by the Calypso fraternity. So you see, we must be consistent in what we say and what we do. On another note, my brother, I realize Trinidad and Tobago is being, having a bath in blood, and it's not the blood of Jesus. It's the blood the other way around by the criminals. So I am thinking now, clearly, we have an ineffective Minister of National Security because we're taking people from Trinidad and sending them to Tobago. Look at Carlson Field. Look at what is happening in Carlson Field. And I would have seen this morning on TV6. It has 4 brand new vehicles, 4 brand new Hilux vehicles, parked up in the Ministry of Agriculture since March of this year, as said by the agriculture, Mr. Khan, I think is his name. And you know what they're waiting for? To being in some big official opening or some building that they're going to have. People are being robbed and kidnapped. 4 government vehicles parked, doing nothing in the weather, only waiting for some big ceremony to commission this and commission that. It's time for this government to go. They are very ineffective. They have outlived their usefulness. They are spent for us now, fellas. We need to change and get things happening in this country. Thank you, my brother. Have a nice day.
Okay, caller, thank you. And we have another caller in Tobago. They are from the U.S. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, are you hearing me?
Caller, good day. You're on the air, yes.
Are you hearing me? Okay, good. Morning, how are you doing? I like this conversation this morning about the arts, etc. I happen to be an award-winning poet and journalist of Trin-Bachgonian descent. I win several awards across the world for my poetry, etc. But Trinidad and Tobago does not engage me in, the lyrical side, where you can pair me with an extempo person, a calypsonian, something, to that I can write something for them, collaborate. And they're not serious, they're not ready. Because, we as poets, we tune into the pulse. I can speak for myself, but we tune into the pulse of things that are happening, and we can record it in a lyrical way. Sometimes when I suffer writer's block, I go back to the old calypsonians, like the Bombers and the Valentinos and the Brother Mudadas, to get my rhyming style in there, And I'm awakened, and sometimes I come up with something like, oh God, not again, another murder in Port of Spain, idle fingers pulling triggers, families hurting, graves keep filling not from COVID, but because of the senseless murders being committed. I just gave you that short lyric there. So I write and I perform. I get to perform at different venues and awards and stuff. But the powers that be, like the analysis and stuff, nobody's taken my book inside the library there. Nobody, they don't put my books in front of the Trin-Bachgonian students, So they're not serious. When they get serious, then, perhaps we can look at Jamaica's serious about reggae. Any Jamaican come out and make a reggae song, and Jamaican behind them. I can't get Trinidad and Tobago behind me with one poet, and that's sad. That's all I have to say today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, caller. Mark, I'll let you respond to that.
No problem. So first of all, thank you for as an artist, your poetry, your lyricism, all of it. Thank you so much for all of the work that you continue to do. There is a level of gatekeeping that exists in different sects of the arts, and we do tend to not do enough collaboration, especially as especially with our own people, our fellow people who are living abroad or things like that, right? We barely do enough collaboration with people that are here, right? I would say that there is a need, and it comes back to the whole mediocrity of and the substandard of the way we do things. Like what is our goal? Is the goal to actually say something? Is the goal to actually have some sort of impact, or is the goal just to create art for art's sake, right? And you have the choice, but you have to make sure that it's the right choice, one for you, for the people, and making sure that there's a good contribution to society. I'd also like to make the 2 points that I was going to make before I forget
go ahead.
The first caller, Diego Martin, mentioned that there was not enough representation in terms of the artists involved and the rollout and stuff like that. So 2 things may have happened. They may have been asked and declined because maybe some artists are they're very wary in terms of any sort of initiative attached to the government. That's just the reality of the situation. They prefer to do their community outreach privately. When I say privately, without the attachment of without any affiliation with the government. That's 1. 2, on the other side, they may not have been asked, and that's a serious thing. If they were not asked and they were not at least part of the initial conversation, then shame on the government.
I mean, that's an interesting point that you gave, because to some extent, yes, if an artist is involved with a ministry, and it goes back to something I mentioned earlier, and indirectly connected, we're more cynical now, so we're less prone to be fooled by bad intentions, but we are potentially more prone to be fooled by our own cynicism because we jump to assumption. Yeah. And I could understand artists who kind of look at the situation and say, I don't want to be associated though with politicians, with politics, with government. I don't want that baggage, because then if anything goes wrong, people will look at me doing a project with them and saying, hey, all your people messing around again just because you do one project with them. So I could kind of understand that. But the flip side, unfortunately, is like you, it's very real to think they might not just been asked.
Yeah.
But now the question is, were they not asked due to politics? Because that could happen. We don't want to ask you because you're not politically reliable. To borrow a phrase from the Soviet military, you're not politically reliable. But it could also be they just didn't know who to ask. They just didn't know who to ask. And we do know that there are performers who are associated with political parties, who have gained the favor, and if you rely on them to inform you, well, they themselves, the artists who have the favor, they will promote people who are within their circle, and they're not necessarily gonna promote anybody or put forward the name of anybody who they are not closely associated with. And then it goes back to the whole conversation of, well, the cliques, and it's who you know, and the subjectivity of the informal arrangements of networking in the artist community.
Right. There's a dangerous game of doing things for aesthetics. There's a dangerous game of doing things because of how it looks. There's a dangerous game of doing things that look politically correct. So the reason I say that, and for me, it all comes down to authenticity. If something is not authentic in every single step of the process, in every single step of the production, in every single step of trying to make this thing work, then the rewards will reflect that that lack of authenticity, right? And it won't be rewarded, and then again it will go into the throwaway pile. As an artist, that's something that's important to me. That's something that's important to a lot of artists, because even within our own, like, in terms of collaboration, right? We would collaborate if we've collaborated with someone before, and everything was really smooth and their intentions are pure and it's all about the music, or it's all about the, for example, for me, collaborating with people who are all about the music and what the actual thing is, rather than the titles that they will hold, or rather than how often it would, or how it will make them look in the end. That's not somebody that I would like to collaborate with, because that's an energy that's yeah, and that's gonna come into this inner circle, this space of what I'm trying to do, and then I don't want to run that risk of it messing it up, because you are about yourself, where I am about the product, the music, the art itself, right? So that's something that happens on a local level, on an artistic level, that sort of thing. So I can imagine on such a big level, on such a big scale, artists who may have been asked or who may not have been asked, looking at this and saying, okay, you're going to ask me to do this, but what does that entail? Do you have the specific details of this? Are you going to ask for more? And is that more going to be not in line with who I am, not in alignment with me as a person and me as an artist? So the easiest thing to do is just to avoid it completely. For me, the biggest thing is it all comes down to mistrust of each other, which is a huge, huge thing. Mistrusting of the government, mistrusting of each other as people, mistrusting, everybody has their own agendas. We need to be aware of those things. However, it creates a negative feedback loop when you put out a product and it's substandard, or let's say you collaborate with people who are genuine in their intentions. They realize that you're not really about the art itself, you're not really about the impact, you're just there for the clout. Then they will, and then the product becomes subpar because of your lack of genuine intentions. Then people will not want to collaborate with you again. People will not want to be on the projects again. So it all, sorry to be redundant, but for me it all comes down to authenticity. How intentional are we with our products, with our arts and that sort of thing? And that would be reflected in the rewards, that would be reflected in the product.
All right, so we have a caller from San Fernando. Last caller for the morning, please, Director. San Fernando, if you're still with us, good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Mr. Peter.
Caller, good
Sean,
morning.
I listened to this, you there, Sean?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Yes, okay. I listened to, let me first say, I would not say that we give art and culture lip service, but I think more can be done and more should be done. Apart from
You're
that,
breaking up for me, caller.
you hear me now?
What? Just now, yes.
Yes.
Yes. I'm not sure what's happening. Probably the weather. Yes. This thing about these artists and this competition that the Minister of National Security talked about. Hello.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes.
This is San Fernando.
Right. Yeah. So this competition that he talked about, and I listened to your caller try to derail you all and send you all along a rabbit hole. Let me say this about that competition, and the question of who they invited to perform.
Yeah.
I don't see the influence on. This is about trying to bring positive songs to a particular set of young people in this country, and those young people are influenced by a particular type of music, which is the Trinidad music. Therefore, I am not hearing any negative chutney song on the radio. So I don't understand that framing it in that particular way. You have to come with something to counteract what is happening. And what is happening is we have a lot of youth gravitating to this ridiculous type of music. And they want to counteract that by using the same genre to bring positive music in positive lyrics in the situation. And that's all it is. That's all it is. Not all the time. It has to be because you do this, because it's pan. You want Tassa. That is ridiculous. That's a stupid ridiculous type of thinking. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. Well, and with that, I'll actually switch gears towards that because I did think to some extent that's where the caller was going, but we didn't bring it up just yet. That is to say, the previous caller. But I didn't hear everything what he said, so I didn't necessarily. Thank you, Mr. San Fernando. Assuming we are not necessarily taking what the caller said, well, he might argue we're taking it out of context, but at least that we're identifying the phrasing and the framing of what was presented. I do find it interesting that on one hand, you would have people basically saying, well, look, according to statistics, this demographic commits crime. This demographic commits most of the crime. And it's a trend that is seen in other countries, not just in TNT. Cool. But then I do wonder to some extent, what would be the point of trying to use other art forms or other genres to target people outside of that demographic if the whole point is an anti-crime message? And diversity does have its strengths, I understand. The other thing is, again, it comes back to what we said. Did they think to involve those people? Were they asked? Did they decline? And yeah, if we're going to say tree bar music is basically being all this negative, the low-hanging fruit is to go to a similar genre or the same genre and to try to turn it around. If rap is promoting gang violence in the States, then you don't counter that with country music, because the people who listen to rap and who get the message of rap are not going to get the message from country music. You'll try and counter it with some sort of a rap song or an R&B song, maybe something that's conscious. Not all rap is gangster rap, and I think that's what Mr. San Fernando was basically saying. And Mark, this is just one of those hard topics because it goes down to the whole race and crime. We already have to deal with race and politics in TNT, and we can't just look at America as an example of how to deal with it because our demographic situation is different. And I think it's the same thing with regards to racial demographics and society and crime and what it really means as opposed to the low-hanging fruit of what some people want it to mean.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's messy. And it's one of those things where we just need to keep having the conversation. We need to just keep. And we need to be honest. And being honest means asking some hard questions and saying some hard truths about it. My eyes will be open to see where this initiative goes. That's all I have to say.
I will say this, though. I do wonder if, to actually support the previous point we were making in the previous segment, we import American culture. And part of it is the urban youths in TNT who live in low-income areas, who might live in, housing projects, high-rise apartment buildings, although not that high in TNT, but, but the concepts are the same. Should we be surprised that they imported the urban culture from the States, of which has, yes, positive aspects, but also negative ones? And we're more or less seeing the parallels, the similarities. Maybe it took a little longer, right? But I basically said this week, wrong place, wrong time. That's more or less what was said in the 90s in America with drive-by shootings, with gang shootings, when we had not everybody who was a victim were opposing gang members. They might have just been innocent civilians who lived on the street, family members who weren't involved. And we're seeing more of that here in TNT now in 2024, 30 years later. And I do wonder if, again, this is how, because we imported, and you could argue, okay, we imported the wrong parts of a foreign culture. And then now, you could compare gangster rap to Trinidad music. We kind of learned, potentially, some of the wrong lessons of how to express ourselves and have a deconstructive result, a less than constructive result. And again, if art strengthens culture and culture strengthens values, well then it works positively and negatively, one could argue.
It does. Kind of comes back to the point I was making about choice. Choosing what we consume, choosing what we promote, and artists also choosing what they promote, what they speak about, right? We live in a cloud culture. When I say not cloud, but clout, anybody who doesn't know that what that word means, clout is basically for the aesthetics, for the trends of it all. And a lot of commercial art is cloud culture. So artists have to make a choice. Artists make a choice of what they put out. Consumers have to make a choice of what they consume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we are more or less out of time, so I want to thank our callers for calling in and voicing their opinion. Yes, even if it seems like we disagree with you or we state that we disagree with you, it's not to say that we don't value the contribution, because at the end of the day, more perspectives are welcome, at least on a forum like this. I won't necessarily speak for all forums and all speakers everywhere. And I always value people who have differing opinions. Mark, thank you for joining me once again. This was an interesting discussion. It probably went a lot further
than we intended.
You might have thought.
Correct. But this is the nature of it.
I do think, though, you're right. At the end of the day, hard conversations need hard truths, and we need to keep talking about it.
Yes.
And with that said, folks, it's the end of the week. I want to wish all of you to have a good weekend. You could make it a good one if you try, as my co-host says. Remember your allegiance to the Republic. Stay safe. Beware the mosquitoes. Mark, I hope you're not being hounded by mosquitoes in your area, in your community, like we are here.
I am.
I don't know what it is this year. What's the difference? You know,
I don't know.
Somebody figure it out, please, and let us know.
Let us know.
And with that said, everybody else, stay safe from the dengue, folks. This is Talking Point on WESN. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.